And so does Harold, and we've had lots of people
Many
digging up
have played, but
a lot of work.
But so I hand it off to Lorette to share with you chapter 2.
Thank you very much.
So does anybody remember where we left off chapter 1? Where we were at in 1938? I'll give you a bit of a clue. Yeah, well, wait, no, don't cheat. Come on. So when we left off, where were we? At Edlong. Well, we were at Edlong. Of course, we were at Edlong. But what was going on in 1938? Who died? Yes! So, yes, not that that's a good thing, but that's what you remember where we were at in 1938. So, that's where we're picking back up. So, 1938, Edward Long had just recently passed away. David F. Brenner also had recently passed away. And the 4 Brenner brothers were now the owners of Edlong. And this adorable little picture here is James Brenner, so one of David's sons, and James' son, James Brenner Jr. So at that time, James Sr. was the president, shortly followed thereafter by his son, Jr. And the Brenner family continued to grow and to grow. So you might remember some of these names from chapter 1. But most notably, I want you to see Jack Brenner. So Jack was the son of John Brenner. So he would have been David's grandson. And Jack came from a family of 7 children. He was the only boy, and he was the middle child. He really had a strong respect for women. His mother was a very strong woman, and his sisters obviously kept him in line. 2 of them were nuns as they grew up, and he was very close to them. So Jack went to Loyola Academy, and he also went to Loyola University. He joined the Navy, and he served time in World War II at Okinawa. After the Navy, he came back and joined the Brenner family business. So so who in the room met Jack Brenner? So you all know he was a very charismatic man. Took over a room when he walked in a room. He had a presence. He had quite the presence. So he got set up on a blind date when he was a young man by one of his friends. And the blind date was with Ruth Ray. And Ruth Ray was very tall. She was very quiet. She was an artist. She loved to paint. And Jack fell madly in love with Ruth. Ruth, according to her daughter, not so much. Took her a little time to warm up to Jack. So back in chapter 1, we talked a little bit about the Brenner Island. This was an island that the Brenner family owned. And Jack took Ruth to the island for a weekend to meet his family. And this is apparently when Ruth fell in love with Jack. And they got married. So in February of 1947, Ruth and Jack got married at St. Ambrose Church in Chicago. And sadly, Ruth could not have any children. She had a rare disease and was not allowed to have children, or could not have children. So they adopted 5 children in their lifetime. They were very family-oriented and very much in love. So in 1953, the Brenner family decides there are too many Brenners and the business cannot support all of these people working in the business. So they split the business into 2, and Jack is given the ultimatum: either you buy Edlong or you leave the family business altogether. Not a easy decision. It was $63,000 to buy Edlong, which is equivalent to, what do you think? Half a million. Equivalent to $500,000 now. So Nancy Brenner, which again is Jack's oldest daughter, remembers conversations around the dinner table that they had about this big decision. Not an easy decision, very risky. We'll be eating beans until we get out of debt. But Jack goes for it. And he buys Edlong. These are the offices on Huron Street. They didn't own this whole building. It was just one little floor there. So 2 years after he makes the decision, he's questioning his decision. He owes more money to the bank than he did when he started. Sales are going the wrong way. But he soldiers on. And he said, I'm going to make a go of this, and I'm going to make it work. So for the next many years, He traveled around the United States to food manufacturers with a little briefcase full of samples. I think that's maybe in the museum at work. And he would go to customers, and he made many lifelong friends. He would stay at their house when he was traveling, and they did his laundry. So they really absolutely loved Jack. I mean, we don't have any customers that would do my laundry. There was only 3 employees at Edlong at the time, and one was Angela Caruso. Anybody remember Angela Caruso? Am I the only? I cannot be the only one. Woohoo! Yay, you remember Angela? She was amazing. They were incredibly close. So Angela was Jack's administrative assistant. Oops, sorry. And then the other employee was Mr. Leonard Penny, and he was the flavorist. The Rick Schultz of the day. So try as Jack might, for 10 years to grow Edlong, it doesn't really happen as he thinks. He grew to about $100,000 in revenue, 107 sales revenue by 1963. It's only about $20,000 in growth in 10 years. Anybody know what that annual rate of growth is, besides David Starr? It's about 3%. So for those 10 years, he grew about 3%. Not good. Not enough to sustain or pay back the debt that he owed. So he decides it's time to do something new. He needs innovative new products. He's got to take a risk. And this is when he hears about this up-and-coming flavorist in Chicago named Gene Rondinay. So when Jack and Gene meet, they instantly hit it off. Both men towering well over 6'5", huge men. I remember meeting Jack when I was little, and he used to swing me. I think he swung Mary too, I'm sure. And his feet were huge. It was very fun. So they both had very similar values, love for family, and they both had a very strong respect and admiration for strong women. So Gene's story starts in Paris in the late 1800s. So he had a great aunt, Eugenie, and she was an interesting woman, and she got the entire Rondinay family over to America. So when great aunt Eugenie was about 14, she was in a beauty pageant, and she won. Shortly thereafter, at a very young age, she married a man, and he was an evil man, and he imprisoned her. She was very brave, and she had one of the help in the house that he imprisoned her at let her escape, and she ran far away to South America, and she joined an opera company. I can't believe anyone in my family can sing, because Mary and I certainly can. So she absolutely enjoyed the opera time, but she missed her family, she missed Paris, so she came back about 3 years later, still a very young woman. And the evil man found out that she was back in town, and he was going to get the property that was rightfully his. And he came to her house, and her brother, Julius, ran him out with a knife and said, "If you ever come back, I will kill you." And he never came back. So Eugenie was very indebted to her brother her whole life. And she continued to travel the world, and she ended up in Chicago. And she met a man named Mr. Schlatter. Some of these names. And Mr. Schlatter was a very wealthy man, and he was much older than her, but they fell in love. He owned many businesses, and one of which was the longest bar in the world that used to be in Chicago. Kind of fun. But Mr. Schlatter died, and she was still a very young woman. So she was left a very wealthy woman, and she took that wealth and brought her family to America, her brother, his wife, and their 5 children. So one of those 5 children was my grandfather, Leon. And he was 5 years old when they boarded a boat heading to Ellis Island from Paris. And one of his sisters, Lucian, she got the measles when they were on the boat. And thank God she healed before they got to Ellis Island, because they used to send the entire family back if you had the measles. So he grew up in Wilmette with his sisters. He came from many sisters as well, in the house that Aunt Eugenie had bought for them. And one little tidbit that's kind of fun is Julius, the father, loved gambling and the racetrack. Isn't that weird? So he's probably here somewhere. But we hear he was a big racetrack gambler. So they enjoyed growing up in Wilmette. And then Leon met his high school sweetheart, who he fell in love with and married, named Loretta, who looks a lot like Mary. We all think, doesn't that look like her? So they had 2 children, Leon Jr. and Eugene. So on a cold February day in 1933, Eugene was born. And even at a young age, he was a very curious kid. He was about 4 years old, and he was out playing around in the garage. And there was a huge grand piano that was getting fixed. It was like leaning on its side, and he was playing around on it. And suddenly, it fell on him and crushed his legs and his entire lower body. And he was in horrific pain, and he ended up in a body cast for over a year. So during that time when he was healing, his father and he became very close. His dad taught him gardening and fishing and all the things he loved, French cooking. They spent a lot of time at the cottage in Michigan. Some people might recognize that picture. And despite Gene's injury as a child, he grew up with an incredible athletic ability. So he played for St. George High School in Chicago. And then he knew that with the Depression in the years following, they didn't have a lot of money. So to get to college, he needed a scholarship. So he landed a scholarship at University of Illinois, and he played tackle. And he got many looks from the Chicago Bears during that time. But sadly, another tragedy happened, and he blew out his knee, and that would prove to be career-ending for him. 1952, he met the captivating and beautiful Catherine Russell, and he fell madly in love. He went back to school and finished out the semester, but he missed Catherine terribly and couldn't live without her. So he quit school. And as soon as he quit school, he was drafted into the Army. Now he was stationed in El Paso, which is a little farther away than Minnesota. But they kept dating, and they ended up getting married June 4th of 1954. They moved back to El Paso, where he was stationed. He was working as a dental technician, and he made prosthetic teeth. They had 2 children while they were in El Paso. It was a really wonderful time. They came back after his tour of duty, and they moved in to the house he was born in with his mother and father, 2 babies, and his new wife. So it was a little crowded. He had a GI Bill, though, so he went to school at UIC, IIT, and Loyola. And he had a passion for biochemistry and a dream to become a doctor. And by the time Catherine was pregnant with their 3rd child, they could afford their own house. So they moved into a little house in Glenview on Thornberry. They built a little makeshift study, and he continued taking classes and worked with one of their neighbors. So one of their neighbors owned a dairy and gave Gene a job as a milkman. So our father is the milkman. So Catherine's 5th pregnancy would prove to be very, very, very difficult. One night she was rushed to the hospital. She was hemorrhaging very bad. So Gene had to get the other 4 children off to his, Catherine's sister's house in Wisconsin. He didn't make it home in time for his milk delivery, and he got fired immediately. Catherine spent the next 6 weeks in the hospital, missing her little children that were in Wisconsin with her sister. And one day a doctor came in and said, "We have to deliver this baby because the mother will die, and then there'll be 4 little kids motherless." So this young doctor was right, and they delivered the baby, and she died 6 days later. So I think this is a loss that Gene and Catherine never recovered from. I've done this 100 times. You think I could get through it? Sorry. So his dreams to become a doctor were suddenly unimportant, and he changed direction. Are we going to edit that? So he used his biochemistry degree and landed a job at Flavor Corporation of America. And he worked under a man by the name of Dr. Tribble and came up with 2 patents on enzyme and oxidation patents that were published. And this is also where he met R.W. Nelson, who you guys have all heard about with Kemen, his lifelong friend there. And neither of these 2 men thought much of Dr. Tribble. He was a greedy man. And one day he fired somebody that was like weeks from retirement just to save on the pension. And they thought that was horrible. So my dad came home to 6 cute little children and told my mom, I quit on principle. And she remembers this and said, you know, I wasn't really that worried. I was really rather busy. And I knew he'd figure it out, and he did. So this is when Jack and Jean cross paths. This is when Jack is looking for that new innovative up-and-coming flavorist, and he runs across Jean's patent, and he calls a meeting. But Jean is also interviewing with Abbott at the same time. And he found Jack's proposal rather enticing. Jack said, you can be the leader, the technical leader of Edlong, and at Abbott he thought, I'm just going to be a number. So he knew it was very risky. Edlong still only had 3 employees, pretty much no money in the bank, and no prospects going forward. So very, very risky, but the wisest decision of his life, really. So Jack and Jean come up to an agreement in July of 1965. He makes $13,000 a year with the opportunity to make profit sharing if they reach over $8,000. But the real clincher was he had the opportunity to buy shares. So 20 shares if he stayed there for 1 year. And that window of opportunity closed September 1st, 1965. So it's just he could buy it during that period of time. So he goes for it. And he starts traveling the country with Jack. And this book is literally in my office, and it's kind of a fun little read. Customers are Frito, McCormick, General Mills, lots of the customers we still work with today. And this is the time when Jean developed the revolutionary cheese base that really changed the industry as we know it. And the first hit was with Nabisco. So sales start growing. They grow 50% the first year, and then another 30% the second year. So Jack strategically recognizes that he needs Jean to continue to be successful. He's very fearful if Jean leaves, that's not going to be a good thing. So one night, Jack and Ruth invite Catherine and Jean over for dinner. And at that dinner, he offers Jean 50% of the company at $100 a share. And a promissory note that he doesn't have to pay it for 3 years. Jean happily accepts this offer. And then on August 23rd, 1 week before the expiration of those 20 shares in his agreement, he buys the 20 shares. So now, suddenly, he's the majority owner of Edlong, which was pretty cool. That was the day we found that out, Harold and I were like, what? There's some things we wish you asked, you know? I think it was an amiable thing, and I do think that Jack was for it. I mean, it was, 50% of nothing or 100% of something pretty cool. So they were very good partners, and they continued to grow. By 1967, they move out of their one little floor Huron office and lease King Street, so 50,000 square feet. Then they start hiring some people. So in about 1972, Henry Collins was hired. Who remembers Henry? Pretty many of us. Yay! Henry was an amazing man. Henry was the mailman on Huron Street. Sure, you probably all know that story that know Henry. They thought the world of Henry. They called him up, and Alice told Harold she thought it was a bill collector. And Jean called her. He took the opportunity. He came in as the traffic manager and quickly moved up to operations manager. And they tried to hire people to work with Henry when he was growing and moving up the ladder. And back in this era, racism and prejudice was alive and well. People would come in and say, I'm not working for a black man. And Jack and Jean said, here's the door. So Henry had found his home, for sure. So in 1969, we're almost there. The profit sharing plan was established. And this was very well ahead of its time, a leadership decision that was not common back in those days. And it really tied into the culture that Jean really wanted to create, and you take care of the people that take care of the business. And this is still a value that's very important today. Who's that? So in 1969, don't do the math, I was born. And obviously I was named after Loretta, but my name is not Loretta. I'm Lorette, but I feel like a little woman when people call me Loretta, but I do like the name Lorette. So the 8th and final child. In 1970, they hired Tom Markey, the first VP of Sales and Marketing, and also Elaine Rolfe was hired shortly thereafter as a secretary. That was politically correct in those days. 1 year later, Jack moves up to chairman of the board, and Jean moves up to president. And now they start thinking about growth internationally. So this is Frank Atkins. Anybody know him? Remember him? A few of us? Very few. Frank was hired to run Edlong UK office in Ipswich. Our second logo was designed. And this one really goes back and is developed on our respect for the foundation of our business being on chemicals. So it was definitely a nod to our foundation. By the late 70s, chemicals were no longer acceptable in the food world. So the name was officially changed to the Edlong Corporation, and chemical was dropped. By 1982, Henry is elected executive vice president. He's now second in command. And Elaine was promoted to vice president of human resources. So business is going really well in the 70s and 80s. By 1972, they purchased King Street, which they were formerly leasing. By 1977, they bought 260 or 225 Scott Street. So things are really moving along, and now look at all those employees. And I tell you what, finding pictures, that's why today's group shot is so important. They took no pictures back then. We've searched everywhere. So this is when they started thinking about international manufacturing. They looked to Ireland, funny enough, and New Zealand as where the best dairy raws were, and started moving in that direction. So in 1983, Jean is now 50, and he starts thinking about succession planning. And Chris is the heir apparent. So Chris is his second oldest son. And for the last 4 years, he was at K-State, Kansas State, studying biochemistry, definitely getting groomed for the position of heir apparent. He graduated there and got a job at Salk Institute in California and worked on DNA modeling or something crazy. He absolutely hated lab work, but he loved California. So Chris was hired as soon as Dick Weiss had an opening in the West Coast, so Chris did sales development under Dick Weiss for many years. So now it's 1983. Sales have grown to 10.5 million. Got any idea how much that growth rate is? That's about 27% annual growth. What's our goal usually? Or this year, for example? Anybody know? Growth rate. 11? Close. No, you don't get that, Jonah. 10, isn't it this year? Yeah, close, very close. So yeah, we're going for about, so 27% for 20 years. Every year for 20 years is rather impressive. Granted, the number that they started with is smaller, but pretty cool. So the business is booming, but Jean's family life is crumbling. So in 1983, after about 29 years of marriage and 8 children, Jean and Catherine get divorced. The relationship has eroded. what seemed like a heartbreak really had some blessings in disguise. I was in about 8th grade, so the only kid home. Everyone else was at college or working. So my dad, who really was a hands-off dad, now had the challenge of parenting a teenage girl, which isn't always easy, and her 2 best friends most of the time. And we were all kind of boy crazy, and that happens when you're about 14 or 15. He did not know what to do with us. We were grounded all the time. We spent a lot of time at the cottage. It was very fun. So my dad and I kind of grew up together. He really learned how to be a hands-on dad, and we worked through it. I spent a ton of time on a fishing boat with RW and my dad, learning about the business from a very different perspective. And I think that's a good blessing. So then, in about 1986, they decided Chris needs to go to the UK and work under Frank in marketing, developing a marketing plan there. Chris, meanwhile, was dating a ballerina in California and really was not happy about moving to the UK for really an unlimited amount of time. He didn't know when he was coming back or really why he was going. So he wasn't too happy, but he went. But then a few years later, Chris decides that Edlong's really not his dream. He doesn't ever particularly want to move to Chicago. It was a big part of it. He's a California guy now and he'll never come back. So Chris moves on and he becomes a teacher. And then, in 1987, we buy 265 Scott Street and renovate it to a state-of-the-art R&D facility. And then Rick Schultz is hired as the flavor technician. So Rick develops a flavor that is being used in the Kraft singles. And Kraft likes it, and it's a hit. A very, very big hit. And with the profits that we got from that hit, we invested them back in the business and technology that was very needed for us to continually innovate and open new doors. Oops. So, the two spray dryers at King Street were added on then at the cost of about $1 million. And Gene was feeling like all of the dreams and all the scientific advancements that he had for the past 30 years were really paying off now. The employees, there used to be 3 employees, now there was well over 100 in 93. So all in all, life is good. So I would say that this is just the beginning. We are only 100. So keep dreaming about what can be for the next 100 years. And what are people going to say about our legacy? And who the heck is going to be up here telling this story? God bless them. So, and you got to just wait for what happens in chapter 3 because it is going to be pretty exciting. So thank you very much.
That story is very insightful and very well done. Well, yesterday she approached me, Lorette, and asked me if I would talk a little or show a video that was made. And I felt honored because, of course, this person is about my father, Gene Randanek. I just wanted to, when she asked me, this thought came to my head about how Lauren and I and my father, for the last 10 years of his life, walked out of the company every day. And every day when when he was done with his job, he would ask us, to wrap it up. Okay, girls, time to go. Even if we were in the middle of a big project or whatever, we still had to pack it up and go. And we would walk down that hallway, down those stairs. But this particular day, it was his last day at Edlong. And of course, Lauren and I did not know it was his last day. And he was really sick by this point. And it was a very slow walk. And we, as we were walking, he kept pausing. And so, especially when we were going down the stairs, he paused about, I don't know, about 5 times. But he was really just needing to catch his breath. But when we got to the bottom of the stairs, there was this moment where he just kind of stopped and just looked around. And it was like he was almost like just taking in the company. I don't know, it was just a really amazing moment. And then he looked at us and he said, they're all really good people, all of them. And we were just kind of like, stunned by that statement, but it was a very beautiful moment. And I know now today, because I do think on some level he knew it was his last day, and I really believe that he was really taking in his life at this company and what he accomplished. And I also know that this person, those that knew him, he had an amazing spirit about him. And he taught you something. I mean, he didn't even have to say much, but he did teach you something. And you kind of walked away feeling a little, just you really felt that. And so, with watching this video, I think just open your heart, because he did have an amazing spirit, and he will teach you. But I think all those that knew him should just reflect on what he taught you. Because I think that's what that day was about. It was him reflecting his own life and just knowing what he contributed to all the people that he touched. So thank you, and have a good day.
Clap, 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 clap. All right, I just have a little project to introduce to you. Behind this. Okay, here is a drawing that Lorette made a few years ago. And it's a picture of an oak tree. And I'm very proud to say she charcoaled this herself with her family. And at that time, she felt that the business of Edlong was much like a tree, a very strong tree, where the sun was the customers and the root is our systems. The trunk would be our strategy. The branches are our processes, and the leaves are all of us, the employees. And she didn't put a lot of leaves on this tree, which is where this project is leading to. But in 1914, Edward Long and the Brenner brothers planted a tiny little acorn. They started a little company, and over the years it's been nurtured and it's grown into a very mighty oak, and that's what this picture represents, our company. And this is now 2014, it's our 100th season of the tree. And all of us in this room, I think, are the 100th year of Edlong. We are the 100th year. The company is the people. And so when we say this is the 100th year anniversary of Edlong, we're talking about us and all the people that came before us. And I think what's really great is that we learned our history over these last 2 meetings, and it taught us about all the people that used to be here. And right now in this time, we are the people who are Edlong. So the project that we're going to do is to take our thumbprint and put it on the tree. It's very simple. I have many little colors of ink you can choose from. Each of us will put our thumbprint on the tree, and you'll know which thumbprint is yours, but of course we won't. And we'll just know that that's our team together, and we'll hang that up in the conference room or somewhere where we can see it. And I think we'll have a lot of pride in that we were the ones who were here at the 100th year, and down the road other people will look at this painting and they'll know that we were here. So that's the project, and we're going to put it over there. and lay it flat so it doesn't fall over. Or maybe we'll leave it here, but we'll see. But we're gonna, before you leave, this is your responsibility. Put your thumbprint on it, and then you can wipe your hand off with a wipe, so you're not gonna walk around like that. And thank you, everyone. I hope you have fun at the track today.
Pam's got the instructions.
The first bet is on us, so come see me. I have a $2 betting voucher that I am happy to hand out to each of you. So we have them right here, so let's do the project and I'll hand it out to you.
All right, do you have the inks, Lauren?